So today I want to talk about a difficult decision I've had to make based on real data that's really kind of justified that it's the right decision to make. So if you're someone who runs businesses, or you work in a managerial position, or you have a senior position where you have to make decisions and often you struggle with these decisions, this might be really relevant to you. Welcome back to consecutive day 1823 of a diary of Runpreneur. And today's episode is all about making data-driven decisions. And sometimes they're not the best decisions that you have to make, or they're not the best decisions you want to make, but they have to be made. And if you're anything like me, I suppose you can procrastinate a lot about them. Before we get into this kind of topic in a little bit more detail, please don't forget that this vlog is part of a fundraiser of saving the lives of children by attempting the ultimate ultra marathon of run vlogging on consecutive days and distance of a lap of the world, barefoot style. And the more people we get in front of, more money we raise, more children's lives we save, which is why I do this every single day. So back to the topic at hand, making data-driven decisions, even when they're not the best decisions to have to make, if that makes sense. And the reason I'm talking about this today is that this vlog is like my diary, so it usually kind of follows suit with what's kind of happening in my life. And obviously I have an element of privacy attached to my life, but I like to talk through my emotions and decisions and justifications and analysis, all of that type of stuff, because it really helps me process things. And today I've had to make a pretty difficult decision in terms of there's a couple of staff members who I've had to make a decision that I'm going to have to either significantly reduce their hours or ultimately let them go. I mean, what I'll do is I'll probably try and retain them on an ad hoc basis with the view to bringing them back in a more permanent based position in the not too distant future if possible. But I have to fully appreciate that the risk associated with that is that they're going to have to find additional work if that's something that's going to be palatable by them. So why I've had to make this decision? Well, for a long time, I like to think I'm fairly systemised, fairly data-driven, but I've launched a new business called Operations Director, and it's taken my systems, processes, people management, and data kind of reporting systems to a whole new level. I'm just going to pass some people, so in a second. And as I've kind of been going through this, I've been introducing new metrics and new things to kind of help me make decisions about kind of difficult scenarios, exactly like what I'm facing today. So I have multiple businesses. Some are quite nicely profitable. Some are very much in infancy stage and actually loss making. And I have people across all of the businesses. We cross-pollinate staff wherever possible as well to kind of spread the workload, keep the operations quite lean as best we can. But sometimes you have to assess things and actually look at how much you're spending on usually the biggest overhead operating expense, which is labour. I mean, obviously labour can be direct labour or OPEX labour. I'm not going to talk about the difference between the two today, but the reality is labour is always going to be a very sizable part of how much profit you make, because there's so many businesses I know that are over stretched from a labour perspective. And ultimately that eats away at the profits. The business doesn't stay profitable. So there's a couple of metrics I generally look at in regards to labour. And there's a third metric as well, but I'm not going to talk too much about that. There's a labour efficiency ratio, which is associating kind of your direct labour against your gross profit margin. And that's a key metric to kind of work on labour productivity, especially if you've got a lot of direct labour. So if you're in manufacturing, for example, that could be a really, really key metric that you would want to kind of keep tabs on. My businesses are around property management, kind of software consultancy, that side of things. I don't generally have a huge direct labour cost, so my labour falls into operating expenses. So the metric that I look at there is labour cost ratio. So what I'm looking at there is the total cost of my labour across the revenue as a percentage of the revenue of the business. And I'm normally aiming for about 30%, 35% an absolute stretch, but no higher than that. Okay. The second one I'll look at as well, to kind of that works in tandem with that, is my salary cap. Now, salary cap is a simple calculation depending on your net profit target. Well, generally speaking, you should always be aiming for a minimum of 10% net profit as a margin, and you ultimately want to gradually increase up to 15% and beyond, because that's then you've got a kind of healthy profit margins in your business. That's not gross profit, that's net profit, okay, net profit before tax. And so the formula here is pretty simple. It's revenue minus non-salarized operating expenses, so all of your costs that are non-related to labour, okay, so all of your costs excluding labour minus 10% of as a profit margin. So whatever you're turning over as revenue, what does that look like as 10% profit? So when you kind of get that calculation together, it gives you hopefully a surplus figure. Otherwise you can't afford staff at all. But if you've got a surplus figure, that tells you how much you can spend on a monthly basis or yearly basis, depending on how the period of time that you've calculated this over, of what you can spend on labour. And if you go above that, you're going to be squeezing into your profit margin. So it's a quite simple formula, but those two metrics, labour cost ratio and salary cap, the two metrics I use, and you can run them as an individual business, or you can run them across a group of businesses if you like, if you're operating like me. And it tells you very, very cleanly whether you're within budget or over budget on labour. And it's very, very easy with people in particular. Just going past someone, so just bear with me a second. It's very, very easy with people, especially when emotions are involved, to sometimes let emotion mask what decision that needs to be made. And that's always been a weakness that I've had in business, is that I've been too tolerant, too nice, too soft. I haven't been able to make those ruthless decisions, and I think maybe I procrastinate about them, but that's the beauty of having data, because now I've got this data available to me. It tells me in black and white what I need to do, and it takes emotion out of the situation. Now, yes, you have to deal with the situation with compassion and in the right way, but it tells me very clearly what needs to be done. And as a result, there's two potential team members that I'm going to have to kind of reduce their hours considerably and put them on ad hoc positions, or ultimately they'll end up moving on to pastures new, which is, I don't really want that, because they're great, but unfortunately their roles are not as integral as the roles that other members of staff are fulfilling, which is one of the reasons we've made that decision. And then that pulled me under my salary cap and keep my labour cost ratio under 30%, which is where it needs to be, to ensure that I'm protecting the profit margins of the business. So yeah, ultimately, the learnings from my diary today are that, first and foremost, sometimes really difficult decisions need to be made. And quite often, if we don't have some kind of reinforcement metric of some kind, you will procrastinate against making difficult decisions because they're difficult for a reason. They might affect somebody's livelihood, they might affect somebody personally, and anything like that, quite often we're going to be quite protective of actually making those decisions, because, you know, people, generally speaking, don't really like conflict or dealing with difficult situations. They like kind of shying away from that. That's just who we are as people. Now, yes, there are obviously some people that are completely fine with doing that, but I have to say I'm not one of them. So the reality is when you have to make these decisions, if you've got metrics or real-time data that gives you an accurate reflection of what you need to do in different scenarios, then it kind of rubber stamps it's the right decision to make. And then when you know it's the right decision to make, you're less likely to procrastinate about it. And that's kind of what's happened here with a couple of staff members. I'm going to have to put them on ad hoc contracts, so they only work when we've got the work for them, or they're going to move on. Really difficult situation with difficult conversations to have. However, the metrics don't lie. I'm using my labour cost ratio, which I like to keep 30% or below as a stretch, 35%, and I use my salary cap metric, which calculates what I'm allowed my budget to spend on labour across the business based on the revenue it produces after we've taken non-labour cost expenses away and our projected net profit target, and that gives us a budget of what we can spend on labour. And the numbers have told me that I need to make a decision, so I'm making it. And I think the lesson there is, when you've got to make difficult decisions, have real-time data that backs up the decision or assists in you making those decisions, and trust me, you'll be able to make them much more proactively than you would have done previously. So anyway, hope that's useful. Any questions or comments, drop me a line. Anything relevant I'll respond to. Do remember though, if you believe in my mission of saving the lives of children by attempting the ultimate ultra marathon of run vlogging on consecutive days, distance of a lap of the world, barefoot style, and do give this a subscribe, share, like and comment. More people we get in front of, more money we raise, more children's lives we save, which is why I do this every single day. Thank you as always. Stay positive, stay happy. I'll see you again tomorrow.